You know how in some markets you'll see stall after stall run by newcomers? Well, Tanzania just rolled out a new rule, officially called the Business Licensing Prohibition of Business Activities for Non-Citizens Order 2025. And that tells foreigners, that they cannot own or run a whole bunch of small or medium-sized businesses anymore. Think corner shops, mobile money kiosks, hair salons, even small-scale manufacturing. Now, the idea is to give Tanzanian entrepreneurs some breathing room, and if the foreigners ignore it, they're likely to face fines up to 10 million shillings, and that's about $3,900, up to 6 months in jail, and possibly lose their visas. And if a local helps them break the rule, then they themselves could face a fine or a few months behind bars as well. Our locals who have been elbowed out of busy markets like Dar es Salaam's Kariakoo are actually excited, but Kenya and other neighbors are not so thrilled. They're pointing out that this move clashes with the East African community's promise of free trade and movement, and there's even talk of a tit-for-tat measure, down the line. So while it might feel like a victory for Tanzanian, small business owners, it also risks fraying relationships with nearby countries and making the region's economy a bit more tangled. Now, joining me on this segment, we have Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO of Share Investment in Georgia, USA. We also have Abdullahi Alas, a governance and policy analyst who is in Oslo, Norway, and Dr. David Masanga, African Affairs Analyst in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania at the moment. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for calling us.
All right, so let me begin with Dr. Matsanga, who is a Tanzanian citizen. Please walk us through the data that showed non-citizens accounted for a significant share of informal traders, particularly in Dar es Salaam's Kariakoo market before this ban, and speak to us about how you feel about the ban.
First of all, thank you very much. I am an East African citizen. I am a Ugandan, born in Uganda, but I have lived in Tanzania since 1978 when we went in exile together with other people. I've been in and out of Tanzania, but I'm Ugandan by birth, by origin, but East African. Okay. And the East African community was formed to bring in integration. The integration of East African community, brick by brick, and the East African community, ECOWAS, SADC, and other organizations would bring African unity. But there has always been brotherly fights, what we call friction that does not blow up into a full-scale war, like the war that we saw between Nigeria and Cameroon over the border dispute, the oil-rich border dispute region. What Tanzania has said, and I want to tell people frankly, that Tanzania is one of the most peaceful countries that you can ever find in this region, surrounded by Muslim neighbors who have been at war. 3/4 of their independence has been sucked into wars and conflicts. It is one of the stable democracies that we have in East Africa. It is one of the liberation organized countries that has liberated most of the countries that you see today talking big in South Africa, southern part of Africa. Therefore, Tanzania's culture has been conservative. All of us know that. On this panel, we'll tell you, they are conservative people. They are people who are brought in, who have a social contract. That's why you see there are no revolts, protests, big protests, demonstrations, military coups, and so on. Tanzania, the country that believed that sharing was the basis. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere brought up this country to that level. But the current situation that is bringing in animosity, It's the way, first of all, most of us from other states have gone into this country, taken advantage, which can bring in the situation that you see, that friction. But it's not a big friction for you to get worried about.
All right, so let me speak to Mukhtar now. Mukhtar, according to reports, Minister Shatsu Kijaji actually described the order as a long-awaited and aimed at empowering local entrepreneurs. Would love to hear your thoughts if you feel this whole ban makes sense, and how exactly does a government measure the impact of foreign participation on a country's small business?
Thank you. I think, again, we have to look at it in terms of context. When you look at those areas that the government is talking about, there are small businesses that have to be dealt with entrepreneurs. And so you're talking about household and other businesses, smaller businesses. Now, when you look at every country, you need to protect your smaller businesses from extinction, especially when they don't have the capital to compete with the best in the world. So you definitely want to protect your local economy. It's just how you go about it that matters. You have the World Trade Organization Charter that you must also be open for trade. Tanzania is a part of this treaty, so it doesn't make sense for you to ban a particular area of participation for foreigners when you are there practicing global best trade practices. Yeah. So, but what I see about it is that you're looking at what other countries have done. Countries like Nigeria, we have done something like what they call local content, where a particular aspect of the economy, you need to have about 60% ownership from locals and 40% from foreigners. And sometimes those foreigners are asked to look for local partners to get some of their holding, because that's the policy. You also see the Nigerian First policy also, whereby they said before you give contracts, especially public contracts to any company, you must also look at if you have an existing local company that can be able to do that job. I think that's what the Tanzanians are trying to do. Maybe the way they are going about it in other developed economies in the world that have found a way around it. Through this World Trade, what they do is that because the World Trade Organization Treaty, they tend to create more tariff. So they decide more tariff on these goods that are coming outside the shore of this country. And so when those goods comes in from there, those goods are charged higher tariff, and they are not able to compete favorably with the local goods that are not charged tariff entirely. So it depends on which way you want to address it. But I think by and large, they are trying to protect the local economy. But maybe the way they are going about it might not be in tune to world-based trade practices.
Oh, okay, now let's come to you, Abdullahi. Abdullahi, the order prescribes a fine of at least 10 million Tanzanian shillings, or even 6 months imprisonment for the violators. Do you think this is excessively harsh?
First of all, my two colleagues have addressed the history and the effects of how they're going about it. What I'll address is what is the effect of this itself. One is it will affect the Tanzanian economy in the first place, because goods that were coming either will stop, those that were taking longer in terms of timing, it disruption of that, and it reduces foreign investment. You know, Tanzania must know that there is a principle of reciprocity in the world. States engage each other with respect, and countries like Malawi, Kenya, South Africa, how are they going to respond is another thing. So I think what needs to happen is even though they protect, how do you cannot force people to be entrepreneurs. I am currently traveling through Europe. I've gone through Brussels. I'm now in Oslo. We'll go to the Netherlands, Finland. They're using one visa. If you go to the local economy, I was going to Oslo today. Most of the people who are, in the counters in Africans, Tanzanians, Kenyans, Nigerians, because what the Norwegians have done is, or Europeans are doing, is they are moving their citizens to middle class and allowing other countries to come and do the manual jobs. So in Africa, I think we need to think outside the box, in the sense that our governance system and the way we want to do things is very mundane. We are thinking about very petty things, entrepreneurship, trade, investment, tourism. First of all, how many Kenyans or how many Tanzanians or how many Ugandans go for tourism? Because for you to go to tourism, at least you must afford your bills, and you have excesses, you have saved. Most Kenyans I know die even without leaving Kenya. Why? The economy is controlled by 1% top there. The rest of the people are struggling with misgovernance, corruption, nepotism, and this. I think that Nigeria, rather Tanzania, will know that other states, Kenya is a very big economy, South Africa is even bigger. So there will be principle of reciprocity. We don't know whether negotiations are going to be held so that they retreat from this. But I am sure if this continues, then Kenya will respond, Malawi will respond, and South Africa will respond. And I don't know what that response will be and how much it will affect the economy of Tanzania.
Well, let's hope that, it doesn't get to that for regional cooperation's sake. Now, let's come back to you, Dr. Matsanga. Now, beyond the fines and jail time, the order allows authorities to revoke visas and work permits of non-compliant foreigners. How many such revocations, have been carried out since the ban, was placed? That's July 28, if you have an idea.
Yes, as we talk right now, there are serious negotiations between the 3 or the 6 partners of the East African community. I'm aware, I've been to Arusha, and I know what is going on. I've been to Dar es Salaam. I also know what is taking place. President Museveni and the President Suluhu, plus President William Ruto and others are looking at the Secretary Generals. They are looking at what can be done to bring about this standoff. It is a standoff. This is not the first standoff. Sometime back, Kenya lost a lot of chicken that were actually destroyed. Sometime back, a lot of Kenya again lost. But when you look at who can benefit more, we can't equate who will be the loser and the winner. All of us share a common destiny. We are all East Africans. One of the problems that I always look at when looking at this question of East African integration and African unity is the way the boundaries were drawn. People just forced us. We have not gone back, and my brother there from Kenya knows my position very well for a long time, and I'm glad to see him here today. We have not gone back to look at how did we find ourselves here. Some of these boundaries are not very good boundaries. Therefore, you revoke a person to go where? I am an East African. If you revoke me not to come to Tanzania, then Kenya also retaliates, and we call it East African Community. What revocation? So far, I've not seen any of the revocations. The discussions are taking place. That is authoritative, I can tell you that. They are taking place, and the people are going to come back and see which type of businesses you can live and which businesses cannot be left.
Oh, okay, now, Mukhtar, can you speak to us or, explain to us how this ban violates the common market protocol's free movement provisions? You can, relate it to what's obtainable in West Africa, because from what we know, Kenya has actually formally petitioned the EAC Secretariat on Tanzania's treaty obligations as well.
Well, in terms of violation, I mean, I'm sure the East African regional bloc also will be looking at that. The South African Development, the South African Development Commission, the East African Development Commission. They have those commissions in place. They're just like what we have in West African, the ECOWAS Committee of West African Nations. So definitely, I think they will be looking at that, like my colleagues in Tanzania said. It's going to involve an ongoing discussion, and hopefully they will be able to arrive at a conclusion. Because again, like I said, you have to protect your local economy. And today, most countries, in the continent, refuse to sign the African Continental Trade Agreement. It's not because they don't believe in this agreement, but because they want to protect their local economy. Because when cost of production is high in your economy become a dumping ground, especially when you have the population to be able to buy other goods from other countries, while other countries will not be buying your good. So you need to look at internal protection. Every nation in the world does that. But the way you go about it is also something that I'm looking at what the Tanzanians are trying to do. If you look at this area, they are looking mobile money transfer. You want to ask yourself how many locals are empowered to be able to do mobile money transfer. So those are things they really need to look at. Sometimes, in terms of partnership, using the Nigerian example, it's more or less about partnership in terms of what do you bring to the table, what do I bring to the table, what am I having competitive advantage over you? Is that what I'm bringing to the table? So these are checks and balances that you looked into, especially when you're talking about regional trade or global trade. So I think for now, they need to do a lot of work. Especially to convince the regional bloc, because again, you can't be putting so much pressure on my own businessmen. Then your own businessmen easily have access to our own market. So once you try to protect the local market, they also will try to protect their local market. And they have a way snowball effect. And some of this snowball effect involve high cost of living for the average in Tanzania, because what do you see that cost of some of these goods will go up because demand are not able to be met by the locals. And that has been the major challenge. Most locals are not prepared to even meet internal demand, talk less of exporting out of the country. So they have to look for a check and balance.
Okay. Coming back to you, Abdullahi, now we know Kenya has petitioned, and President Ruto also hinted, he talked about it, possible retaliatory actions against Tanzanian traders in Kenya. So what if, what happens if Kenyan spaza shop owners suddenly face similar restrictions rather than, Tanzania backing out of, their threats?
Well, I think as my colleague has said also, not only president, but I'm sure foreign ministers are meeting from these countries and discussing how this is going to affect their relations. Remember, these are lobbying groups that are supporting each other. But I think the market for this money transfer, Kenya is among the leading countries in terms of money transfer. Remember, we have M-Pesa. And if you look at the people doing M-Pesa in Kenya, they're not only Kenyans. You will find Tanzanians who have businesses. You'll find Ugandans, majority of them in the borderlines. You'll have people from Somalia who have taken U.S. citizenship, came back to invest. And I think controlling the market, sometimes the demand and the supply will depend on those who need what and when and how. So it will not, add value by saying, we are going to protect one of our own. I mean, you can, if you want to protect one of your own, you should increase productivity, and then you should increase how Tanzanians are doing business so that many Tanzanians can do business at a cheaper price in terms of maybe electricity for those who are in services, agriculture in terms of providing equipment, contemporary farming, whether it is providing pipes so that the Tanzanians can empower themselves through a government policy. But you see the market is controlled by a different thing. The market is controlled by demand and supply. The market is controlled those with money. The market is controlled both those with needs. And we don't just sell goods and services. We sell emotions. Yeah. If you go to a shop and someone treats you bad, regardless of how much you need that item, the attitude and how you talk to people, clients matters. So I think what Tanzania needs to do, it can protect its own citizens. That is the first, prerogative of a state. But if you're dealing with other people, I mean, we are over 8 billion people in Africa, and almost 50-something countries need each other. So I think, regardless of whether someone wants to be tough they want to prove a political...
You talked about us needing each other. So do you think that this policy could scare off broader foreign investment? Abdul?
It will scare them, but I think it will scare them. Foreign investment will be, affected in the sense that people will start monitoring. If Kenya responds, for that matter, and South Africa responds, and then Malawi responds, then what happens? So that's where now the catch on foreign investment will be looked at, because foreign investors need a very stable market. They need a very stable institutions and markets and demand and supply that emotionally people are not either worried. I'll tell you this, I'm here for the second night. When I was in Nairobi, there is always, you're looking over your shoulder, whether it's through your car or in the matatu. So allowing people to feel peace, allowing people to feel secure in terms of business is a key component in business. I think Tanzanians will look at themselves and try and consider that this doesn't escalate further, and Kenyans and other countries are also a bit tolerant.
Okay. Now, Dr. Masanga, do you think, or does the Tanzanian government plan to engage the regional legal bodies or even the East African Court of Justice in order to defend this order?
Yes, I think there is one element also which our viewers or the viewers should not miss. There has been quite a lot of interference from the Kenyan political class into the politics of Tanzania that brought about this huge approach of this deciding to take on the business people. My colleague there will tell you a few months ago, several Kenyans wanted to export the type of democracy, the type of politics that they do in their own country. And that has angered the government in Dar es Salaam or Dodoma. So coupled with that political animosity that has been existing between NGOs that are crossing over and going into Dar es Salaam and Tanzania, trying to influence a conservative, purely conservative, peaceful nation, that they win the election, nobody goes to the streets to beat about people. Nobody demonstrates, nobody burns down. Unlike in my country, across in my country, Uganda, where elections are like a battlefield, where in Kenya also elections are like a battlefield. So that one created a problem.
Okay.
But on the question of the negotiations and on the question, there is one thing that you must know, that Tanzania stands in two regional bodies. Tanzania is a member of SADC and a member of East African Community. That has brought always a lot of friction, and let people know about that. It is also a member of East African Community, but one leg is in SADC, one leg is in East Africa. So they prefer, I don't know where they prefer to stand. So our viewers should know that these are issues that can be resolved. They are going to be resolved. Tanzanians and the East Africans always live together. The quarrels are always there, but we come back to live together.
All right. Now, while we wrap up, Mukhtar, let's pass this last question to you now. This ban actually affects small-scale mining, like parcel delivery services, local hairdressers, salon owners, and the likes. Now, since these services underpin daily commerce, how will the government ensure service continuity and prevent price hikes? And also, let's also remember that consumer price inflation in Tanzania was like 4.3% in June. Do you think that restricting competition in informal sectors can push those prices higher?
It will push them higher because you are looking at demand and supply. You are, especially if foreigners are playing this space. But from the available data, I don't think foreigners are really playing this space. You're talking about hairdressing, you're talking about a lot of things that are not normally local driven. But again, when you had a dimension of tension and pressure in a particular sector of your economy, then you are creating partial artificial shortages, which will lead to price hike in the short term. If not addressed, that could continue for a long time. So, but I think it's a localized economic product. I mean, with the exception of the mining that you are talking about, which again, I don't know how locals will play that space without enough capital to invest in that space, especially when you look at consumer inflation and when you look at their interest rate. Definitely, that's a sector you want to open to foreign investors so that they can come in with FX to stabilize your rate and to bring down inflation in your economy. So I don't think I think in the short term we might see what you just mentioned, but in the long term there will be price stability because, like I said, I don't think this is a space that you have so much foreigners competing in that space. If you have so much foreigners competing in that space, foreigners owning large saloon, foreigners running large mining field, foreigners are also having having take in some of this sector, then you have those challenges when you withdraw it, then you create a major scarcity. But the scarcity that we'll see now will be artificial scarcity driven by pressure and also government policies.
Okay. Well, I think with that, we have to wrap up this show. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Dr. Masanga, Mukhtar, and also Abdullahi. We appreciate you for, speaking to us on this.